Okay, so I said I would do a quick tutorial on baking AOs. So what I'm going to be focusing on is baking AOs on the skin texture here. It allows you to add pretty good details to pretty much anything. Like you can see here on the jacket here, this is just a baked AO on a pretty much solid texture with some details on the outside here, but this is all just a baked AO. So you can see here on the skin texture here, there's not a whole lot of detail. There's some, because it's just a TDA texture here. But what we want to do is we want to bake AO on it to allow for different, more details where there should be shadow. So we're going to go ahead and the first thing we want to do is we want to separate the texture, sorry, the material that we want to bake to. In this case, we're baking to the skin here. We want to separate this material out from everything else, just like this. And then we want to remove all of the other materials from it. Since we only have one material, we don't have to worry about deleting these. They exist on these objects themselves. So I'm just going to get rid of all of the objects here, all the materials. I just woke up, so sorry if I'm a bit dumb. And then we're gonna use that to bake. So what you want to do first is you want to go into your world settings here. You want to enable ambient occlusion, and it should be add by default. These are my settings here. You can set the samples here will determine the detail, how high quality your AO is basically. You can set it to like 5 or 10 for baking like to begin with, and you can ramp it up once you get a good bake. One of the important things you will also have to do is make sure you don't have any overlapping UVs. If there's any kind of asymmetry in your model. So if you use maybe like a base TDA body, you might have some issues with that, because I know that there is basically just cut in the middle and a lot of things are overlapping. I have basically had to remake my my UVs here by just retexture atlasing it by itself to get something like this. So once you have that done, all you have to do here is you go into, and you can basically make your own texture just for a UV. So what you can do here is you can go in and you can hit the plus here, and we'll make this 4K because I know that's the size of my base body texture. I'll name this AO temp, and then we'll pin it here. And the idea is that it will bake onto this texture. You can bake onto another texture because you're ending up just replacing it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then we're going to go here to the render tab. We're going to go to bake, choose ambient occlusion, and we're just going to bake. And real quick, this is kind of what you'll get. You may have some issues with black textures where there shouldn't be, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that in addition to the lack of overlapping UVs, you make sure your normals are all facing outwards, because the normals are facing inside, they're going to come out black. So you can check your normals here real quick on the area. So like say like, okay, this is black and it's not supposed to be. You'll want to go in here, look at your face normals on it, and then make sure they're facing outwards. This little button right here. You can adjust the size of the normals. And if they are not, you can use cats to recalculate or flip normals, or you can just do it through Blender options. Another issue is that if you have certain, when it comes to things like an AO here, like you can see, I've got the jacket. That's why you get this kind of this V shape here, because that's the shadow of the jacket affecting the skin. If you don't want that to happen, because there are some pieces you may not want to be shown in the AO if they move. So for instance, I don't know, like if you're baking an AO on the face for some reason, you don't want the eyelashes or the eyebrows to show, because the problem is that when the eyebrows move with the shape key or something like that, the texture underneath on the skin will not move, so there will be a shadow there still, where there shouldn't be. So you want to exclude those things. That's why you want to separate out exactly the mesh that you want to bake onto. And then what you can do is like say, I don't want this fishnet piece or whatever to show up in my AO. You go into your outliner here, you find the object, and you click this little camera here. So turning this off will make it so that it won't appear in the AO. So if I uncheck the jacket here and do another bake, so select this, go into edit mode, reselect the geometry, hit bake again. You'll see that the jacket's no longer shown. But we do want the jacket, so I'm going to recheck this. Rebake. Bake the jacket for no reason. I do. Oh no. There we go. Okay. Alright, so we have essentially what is our AO here, and this is pretty good. You can always up the samples, but I usually leave it at 10. It's pretty fine. The higher the samples, the longer it's going to take to bake. So it's just how much time you have and how high quality you want it. So from here, we're going to save the image, and I'm going to switch to Photoshop here. So give me 1 second. Got my screen. I'm going to save as image. We're going to go into Photoshop. So we're in Photoshop, and you can use GIMP, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm going to use Photoshop because that's what I use. There's a translation for everything into GIMP. Well, what I have here is I have my base skin texture laid out here, and then I have my AO here as a layer. So you just import the AO, lay it on directly on top. As long as it's the same size image when you created that new image in Blender, it'll overlay it right on top. And by default, it'll just look like something like this. Like that. You won't have this blue stuff because that's stuff that I painted on. And from here, you want to set the layer style to soft light. And that allows you to have the, it'll basically take anything that's 50% gray will be transparent. Anything white will be, slightly brighter. Anything black will be darker. It'll basically add the shadows and overlay on your skin texture. I usually set it to soft light, and then you can kind of tweak the opacity here to get exactly how dark you want the shadows to be. I think this is good enough for how it is. So we'll just save here. And then let me switch back to Blender here. And I will refresh my texture here, which has already been set to the Photoshop document because that's the way I work. Here, and we'll refresh. And you can see the difference already. It's a pretty big deal in terms of the shading that you get, especially between like the boobs. You'll get better shading between the fingers. Anything like this, you'll get shading here. And then if you look at the jacket, you'll have shadows along the jacket here. And you can kind of play with this in Photoshop. If you want like more exaggerated jackets, you can play with the render. If you want more bleed. What I did do here is that I changed the... let's see, I think I changed the factor from the default. The higher you change it, I think it gives you more bleed. In terms of things like, you can see how it's slightly darker here rather than just exactly along the lines of where it is over the skin here, the shirt, because you want some kind of contact shadows, and I think it looks pretty nice at the end. And you can always tweak it in Photoshop as well. You can always go in and say, like, I don't want AO on the hands, just go in and erase the parts of the hands you don't want in the AO. That's pretty much all there is to it. Let me know if there's any weirdness.